Actually, I'm really picky about food.
Learn how to stop the design.
Okay, guys, so go ahead and start the thing, set it to 14 minutes. It should be recording right now, and we're continuing on with part 3 of Egypt. Okay, so now we've established how between Saqqara and the mastabas we have this progression, right? We have this guy Zoser who, kind of decided to take the mastaba and put it on major steroids and make it massive and gigantic. So after this, that becomes the standard. And for decades and decades and decades after that, centuries actually, it was the standard. Okay, it was still referred to in Egyptian literature as this amazing thing that Zoser had done. And so now we have all of the subsequent pharaohs during the Old Kingdom period that they chose to use this idea of the pyramid and expand upon it as their sort of their final sort of home, their home in the afterlife on Earth. Okay, and so we're going to go on to the pyramid of Khufu, which is also called the pyramid of Cheops. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. So it is the largest pyramid. Or it is one of the largest pyramids, and it is an extremely complex piece of architecture. Imagine that you guys are dealing with something that is just short of prehistoric. Most of the rest of the Earth, okay, was, wearing skins and, trying to not get eaten by something. And here we have this architect, Imhotep, who is devising this massive structure. Okay, I mean this huge structure, and he's doing it as this perfect triangle. So the sides of the pyramid literally are being formed at 51.42 degrees. I mean, it's an amazing feat. All right. So it's got in an internal core, then it's got a stone core after that, and then it's got the casing stones that go on the outside that are mostly gone. Right. Within it, there's all sorts of subtractive sort of chambers and stuff, all using axial alignments. We talked about axial alignments last week, right? And it's got all these different chambers inside of it. A lot of people think, well, the pyramid's this big solid thing, right? And it is a big solid thing, but the purpose of the pyramid was to create these chambers for worship and for the afterlife of the pharaoh. Did somebody say something? No? Okay. All right, so let's continue on, taking a look at it. Here is, one of the classic views. You see stepped pyramids in the foreground here, and then you see the Khufu's pyramid in the background. I believe Khufu's pyramid isn't actually the biggest pyramid. There's one that's bigger, but it sits on top of a higher area of land, so it's perceived to be bigger. So I read that somewhere. So inside of the pyramid are these hollowed out chambers. Okay, it's interesting to note that they actually did not find the remains of Khufu here. So there was a place for the sarcophagus, and there were casings and stuff for it, but they didn't find it actually inside the pyramid. And so you can see that there are these hollowed out pieces, right? That are creating these kind of subtractions inside of this big massive thing, right? And understand that thing right there is the equivalent of about, not quite, but about a 42-story building. 42 stories.
Holy shit.
I mean, you guys have seen the high-rises in downtown, right? The tallest one's about 51.
What's the tallest one in Dubai?
No, not. I'm trying to relate it to something that you guys have encountered here, right? You guys all drive the 10 freeway probably. There's a tower right over there on Barranca, right? That thing would fit inside of this 2 or 3 times, or 4 or 5 times actually. That's how big this son of a bitch is. Ooh, did I say that?
Yes.
Oh, dang. Okay, anyway, and then, you know, it's got all these chambers and stuff inside it and these air shafts. And the air shafts, believe it or not, the air shafts actually point at stars.
Nice.
I mean, I have no idea. It's just incomprehensible to me how these things could do that. How somebody of this ancient a culture would actually know where a star was going to be on a given date so that I could cut a hole through a 42-story structure and point it right at that star.
They didn't have computers.
And they didn't have computers. That's right. No computers. So, right. Another view showing kind of a three-dimensional layout of the air shafts and the various chambers that are inside of that thing. And next we have kind of this image, and just to get a scale, there's a person standing right here. Right there? And you can get an idea of how big the stones are compared to, let's call it a 5'8" tall man, standard man. Okay? So, again, these were the most impressive structures and the highest structures until modern times. Nothing came close. The general plan, these pyramids are in Giza, Egypt, which is in Lower Egypt. Remember, I asked you guys to kind of take a look at that map, right? And I can actually back us up real quick to the map, all right? But if you take a look, there is Memphis, there is Saqqara, and there is Giza, okay? Oops, I gotta move my cursor over to this side. Where'd my cursor go? There it is. So there's Memphis, Giza, and Saqqara. They're in a very sort of compact area, okay? So going back to this thing, this gives you kind of an idea of the plan, and you can see all of the mastaba fields back up in the top there. You can see various pyramids, Khufu, Khafra, the pyramid of not the pyramid, but the temple of Khafra down at the bottom next to the Sphinx, okay? So you can see that this is a massive complex, right? Another necropolis, like Saqqara. So continuing on, here is a modern day sort of view of that area. And you can see the pyramids, you can see all of the mastabas, right, in the foreground. And then you see modern Cairo in the background, or Giza in the background. I'm not sure if it would be Cairo or Giza. All right. One of the things that occurs during this period of transforming the mastaba into a pyramid, right, and then the pyramid being transformed not just into a place where we're going to bury the pharaoh or something like that, it becomes a place of worship, and the pharaoh demands even in death that he be worshipped, okay, and that the god that he is associated with be worshipped. And so that led to this idea of a temple architecture. Still, the temple architectures are associated with death. Okay? Yes, there is this notion of religion, but it's religion of dead. Different than most other cultures. All right? So we've already been talking about the pyramid of Khafra, and one of the things that we just want to cover some kind of pieces that are associated. There are temple complexes that are linked to the pyramid. Okay, so it's not just this pyramid sitting somewhere. There was this master plan that showed this linkage of pieces. All right, and the temples of Khafra are down at the bottom. I pointed out in the plan to you earlier that the Sphinx is straight down from this pyramid, right? So some of the things that I want you guys to be aware of in these temple complexes are some of the characteristics of the temples. One of them is that they have these large open courtyards inside of them. Okay? There were passageways that were covered. So the open courtyards are open to the sky, right? But there were passageways that were covered around them. There were pillared areas. Pillared means columns. All right, and remember that in Zozer's case, we see the first use of heroic columns being used. There were axial alignments of spaces, and we spent quite a bit of time the other day talking about axial alignments when we walked out in front of the building and we put tape all over the place. Remember that? All right, so that's one of the things that we're going to ask you guys to kind of follow up on. I asked you guys all to buy to have the sheets of trace paper, right? And that's because I'm going to be giving you plans, and I'm going to ask you to find axial alignments. Okay. All right. So here you can see the big temple of Khafra at the back, and towards the front there's an image that you guys all probably associate with Las Vegas. No. You guys all associate with Egypt, right? The Sphinx. The Sphinx, we were talking about it earlier, just chit-chatting. The Sphinx was actually carved out of bedrock. They were using that area to quarry stone for a temple, right? And it was literally carved out. There was a pit that was carved out, right? And as they carved it, they came up with this sort of Sphinx. Now the Sphinx, I think I've got pictures of it and some additional things later on, but the Sphinx had the body of a lion and the head of a man, and it was considered to be this terrifying guardian. Okay. This picture right here is showing kind of an interesting thing. It dates back to the 1870s, and when they discovered the Sphinx, the only thing that was outside was the head. You can actually see where there's like this differentiation in color up there. So the head was up, and every rest of it was covered in sand. It's kind of like when your cousin kind of buried you in the sand with your head sticking up at the beach. It was sort of like that, and as they started to excavate, they found this larger animal underneath it. Okay. Some claim that the head that is on the Sphinx is Khafra's head. Other people don't believe that that's the case. Just to give you kind of a sense of scale, there's a camel and a person in the foreground right there. All right, but directly adjacent to the Sphinx is the temple, right? And it's called the Valley Temple. The reason it's called the Valley Temple is because the pyramids sit uphill from the Nile River. Okay, and the Valley Temple sits down at the edge of where the flooded river would be. So understand the difference, right? When the Nile is not flooded, when it's doing its thing, let's say it's, I don't know what it is, but I'll throw a number out there. Let's say it's 150 feet across, or 200 feet across. When it floods, right, it turns into this massive swath of water. The water rises and covers major parts of the land that would normally, right, be dry. And so the Valley Pyramid is designed and set at the edge of where the flood would be. So when the water rises. This next image is not a very accurate image, but it's an interesting image because it shows the relationship of the pyramid, that elevated road that is called a causeway, and then a resemblance of a temple. Notice that the Sphinx isn't there. Okay. So only reason I'm showing you this is to get this idea that when the Nile flooded, the water would come up, and it was predictable where the water would come to, right? It would come up to where the temple was, the Valley Temple.
You should end the video.
What?
You should end the video.
I should end it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, let's end it. Let me look and see what's coming up. All right.